Hi, welcome to Culture Shot. I want to talk this week about backstory, an interesting idea which has been evolving in my brain over the last couple of weeks. And what I mean by it very simply is if you think about your favorite novel or your favorite story, whatever it might be, that story is going to have had a backstory to it. There'll be something to it which enables the story that you're now telling or is being told to you to take place. Something that underpins all of that. And I think your organization has one too. And I think it's worthwhile uncovering that, especially when you're trying to relate your core values to employees. And I think, I just want to recap, if I can, the last few weeks, because those of you who've been following Culture Shock closely, you'll know that I've been on a bit of a trip these last few weeks as I've been examining all of this that's been unfolding in my own brain. If you haven't, then it's perhaps worth having a bit of a recap. And anyway, I think it'll help to unfold this particular idea a little bit. And I think there are three big ideas to me that have really sort of dominated my thinking over the last few weeks around core values. The first one is that in order for you to be able to build anything out of a set of core values for your organization, to get people to align behind them, to create the kind of excitement that lets them live and breathe, to get any kind of alignment where people are actually on the same page and doing all the things your core values are supposed to do, you need to find things that are, honest to God, core to you as opposed to simply preferences. And this is something that I alluded to a couple of weeks. I think most organizations have a set of preferences. There are things, we'd quite like it if it was like that around here, but we're not really willing to do much about it. And that being the case, you don't have core values, you have preferences, and people are, with preferences, able to pick or choose and kind of go, well, do we like that or don't we? That's the whole point about preferences. And that just kills the whole thing. Part of the reason that you're struggling to get to terms with your core values, very simply, is because they're not core. And the way you know they're not core, this is number two, the second big idea, the way you know they're not core is because you haven't got a backstory for them. If you have something that is core to you, and when I mean this, what I mean is you live or die by it, you lose sleep over it. You know that when things are like this, when people act in this way, whatever that thing may be for you, you have better business, you have better relationships, you have less friction, people are getting along better, the work feels less arduous and the results are better. When people are following that and there's predictability in your decisions and all of those sorts of things, when that happens, it's because that's a core value and people have got behind it because they understand why it's there. You've been able to explain a backstory to them. You've been able to say, this is the way things are and this is why. We follow this, we think this way, we do these things, we act in this way, we observe these behaviors and we obsess about them because we know when we do, we get these results. And when we don't, we get these results. And we never want it to be that way. If you can explain them with that kind of a backstory, then the third big idea starts to come into play for me, which is that this idea that it's incredibly complex, and I think it is, to find people who match our core values. Well, I don't know how to do that either, and I said this the other week. I think it's a really difficult thing to do unless you've got real, honest-to-God core values. If you've just got a set of preferences, you can hunt forever. At the interview time, everybody interviews well. Everybody will appear to have your core values because they'll tell you they've got them. But if you've got real core values, then you're really looking for people who are able to adapt to them. Not people who necessarily have them inherently, unless they're so strange and so obscure that you really are looking for a peculiar set of people, but that's not normally the case. You just want people who are able to look at them and go, okay, I understand why it's there. I understand why it's important. I understand what the impact is, so I know I have to do that. And when they do that and they're able to adapt to it, that's when you find people who are able to live out your core values without going through all the rigmarole of 50,000 types of tests to try and find out how people think. I mean, goodness me, it's pretty complicated as it is. We don't need to be any more complicated than that. And all of that leads me to this other big idea, which is the fundamental backstory, the backstory of your organization. And I want you to think of it in terms of, as I said earlier, in terms of your favorite novel. I mean, most novels, if you've read a really good yarn, a really good story, one that really got you engaged and kept you with it, what you may not have noticed, but if you think about it now, it might just suddenly be more obvious, is that story started pretty much close to the end. It was fairly close to the end. A lot of the stuff that had led up to it had already happened. I mean, it's really boring if you're going through all of the backstory stuff, if you're going through all of that. I mean, you could just take forever to try and build up to it. You want the action, you want the stuff that's exciting, the stuff that's compelling. That's the stuff that's happening right now. So if your story is about a murderer on the run, the murder's already happened. He's already on the run. That's already happening. And now the story's about the chase, where the action is. And that's a really, really important thing when you're delivering your narrative. You want to be able to start talking about where you are now as a result of the backstory. You want to fill in the backstory, and the backstory gets filled in stages throughout any kind of good novel, because you need that as well. You just don't dwell on it, because that's not really where we're at. And the problem with it is, with core values sometimes, is that we get locked in this whole sort of staid, boring way of presenting them as if they're static, as if they're locked in time, as if they don't have any emotion or any feeling or any emotion or any activity or any kind of strength or a life of their own. And that's just absurd, because if there are core values, they absolutely have those things. They've got urgency, they've got excitement about them, they may be a little bit challenging, they may be a little bit provocative. That's the point of them. And it's that stuff that you want people to live. You want them to get inside the values and go, you know what's really, really cool about this? I get why it's here. I get why it matters. I know that I need to adapt to it because it's really, really important. And the cool stuff is when you start to do it, this happens and that happens, and you can actually feel how alive they are. When you've got that, because you've built up the backstory, because the backstory exists already and you've thought it through, you can present these things in their final stage. They support the story that you're already trying to tell. Without all of that, what you've really got is you've got a bunch of static words on the wall. I can't stress this enough. It drives me crazy how often this happens. Because we all want people to follow our core values. We all want people to get behind them. But we choose them badly, and they don't really mean what we think they mean, and we don't really care about them, and we can't really explain them, and they don't have any life. They're just static words, and the whole thing is just so unsatisfactory for everybody. I'm tired of it. I bet you are too. And I think it's time that we started to look at this completely differently. So that's food for thought for me for this week. I hope it's food for thought for you as well. And I wish you a very good week.